A friend of mine and a concerned Anglo-Quebecer asked me to do a vlog breaking down Francois Legault's Bill 96 to expose it both to Anglo-Quebecers and to Canadians and the world at large. The apparent attack on linguistic rights in the province of Quebec coming from the Francois Legault government. And for those of you who don't know who Francois Legault is, he is the Premier of Quebec, and he has proposed this Bill 96, which is an amendment to Bill 101, a 1977 law that sought to promote and protect the French language in Quebec. This law, Bill 101, the original one, created what is humorously referred to as the Language Police, the Office de la Langue Française, which was an administrative body that sought to implement and enforce Bill 101. Bill 101 itself sought to protect and promote the French language by creating certain signage rules, by creating certain rules for businesses, government entities, etc., etc. 40 years later, and the government does not feel that the original Bill 101 achieved its desired objective of protecting and promoting the French language. The government cites an apparent decline or a feared decline of French spoken within the homes. So what does a government do after 40 years of a failed policy? Well, they double down on that policy and make it even more stringent, which is basically what Bill 96 seeks to do. Now, before I get to the punchline of the request of my friend, I'm just going to go over some of the essential elements of Bill 96. It seeks to amend, creates 200 some odd amendments to reinforce and strengthen the original Bill 101, which after 40 plus years did not achieve its objective, its desired results. Side note, so that anybody doesn't really appreciate this, this existed under Bill 101, certain signage rules that under Bill 101, public signage in the province of Quebec had to be in French or predominantly French. There was an exception carved out for trademarks, registered trademarks or common law trademarks at the time, so you could get away with Starbucks, Second Cup, etc. Interesting side note, Tim Hortons, for whatever the reason, I don't know if they didn't benefit from the protection, or whatever the reason, apostrophe S is a purely English element of language. So signage that had an apostrophe S was English by definition, and therefore impermissible under Bill 101 in the province. So Tim Hortons removed the apostrophe just so they could have uniformity among their branding across the country. That's the funny story behind why Tim Hortons doesn't have an apostrophe S anywhere in Canada. So a lot of these rules already existed, but Bill 96 is going to make them even stricter and more stringent on the Anglo population. The government reassures us this is not to violate the rights of English Canadians or non-French speaking Canadians. They will be protected. This is just to really protect the French language and promote it in Quebec, because apparently it's still on the decline despite 40 plus years of Bill 101. 200 plus amendments that are seemingly on their face going to violate some of the rights of English speaking Canadians. How does this happen? Well, now we all know after the pandemic that there is this provision of the Canadian Constitution known as the Notwithstanding Clause, which was negotiated into the 1982 Constitution because the provinces were afraid that the recently created Supreme Court would effectively usurp any provincial autonomy that the provinces had, and they would be subject to the authority of the Supreme Court of Canada. So they included this Notwithstanding Clause, which basically provided that certain rights guaranteed under the Charter could be violated if the law that so violated those charter rights specifically said it was violating those charter rights, and the violation could not last longer than 5 years because that's the next time the provincial government would sit. And so if the citizens didn't like the specified, overt, and direct attack on their constitutional rights, they could vote that government out of office. But the Constitution contains a Notwithstanding Clause that allows the provinces to specifically violate certain charter rights if the law says that it's specifically violating those charter rights. It's been implemented or invoked by Ontario a couple of times, Quebec a couple of times, and one of the amendments that is coming out of Bill 96 is a hotly contested one, and it's a unilateral amendment to the Constitution of Canada, which would provide that Quebec is a distinct nation, and that a nation, by the way, this is changing the terminology of the Constitution. It will refer to Quebec and recognize it as a distinct nation within Canada, and that French shall be the official language of the nation of Quebec. There is some argument as to whether or not a province can unilaterally modify the Constitution of Canada, even if it only relates to a provision or portion of the Constitution that applies only to that province. Apparently, Legault seems to think, and his constitutional scholars seem to think, you can unilaterally modify the Constitution of Canada itself without having to go through the amendment process of the Constitution as provided in the Constitution. To be determined. The government is saying that the proposed amendment to recognize the province of Quebec, it's purely a gesture to recognize the nation of Quebec, and it's not going to have any legislative or meaningful impact. To be determined, but typically you don't make amendments unless you want it to change something, even if the government is saying, well, the amendment only confirms that which is already the status quo. So that's one thing. Unilateral amendment of the Constitution of Canada done only between the province and Ottawa. It's going to impose tougher signage laws. So my understanding under the new Bill 96 provisions, public signage is only going to be able to be in a language other than French if it is the registered trademark of that company and there is no French equivalent registered trademark of that company. So that's a bit of a change, making it a little bit harder and more costly to do business in Quebec. Speaking of making it harder to do business in Quebec, the new provisions are going to require businesses, smaller businesses, to operate in French. Under the old Bill 101, it only applied to businesses that had 50 employees or more. Under the amendment, it's going to apply to businesses of 25 employees or more. That's going to increase the cost of business, make it more difficult for pretty much anybody to do business in Quebec, certainly outsiders. And so whether or not that's actually going to preserve and promote the French language or actually just penalize the Quebec economy, to be determined. If it didn't work the first time, surely it's going to work the second time with stricter rules. It makes it more difficult for employers to require another language to be spoken by prospective employees in the application process, which, may or may not promote the French language within the province, but will certainly make it more difficult for Quebec businesses to do business outside of Quebec in Canada and internationally. And so you imagine this is going to apply to businesses of 25 people or more. That's not very many employees. And that is a very strict and stringent measure to impose on businesses in order to do business in Quebec. Labeling, packaging. Back in the day, the language police would literally go into kosher restaurants and say that the kosher products, which have a very limited market, were not respecting the law, Bill 101, because they didn't have French and English. And so I don't know what the market is for these products outside of certain niche communities, but these communities were being penalized because very niche products did not have French on them. I personally, one of my own clients, had issues because they imported canned foods and the stamped on ounce measurement was only in English, which I think is OZ, and not in French, which I think is ON, because it's once in French and ounce in English. I forget which one it was. Bottom line, they actually had to put on a sticker to indicate the weight of the package in French abbreviated terms for ounce in order to be compliant. They had to hand oppose labels on certain products that did not have the French translation of the product. So agree or disagree with it, this is the additional cost of business that it imposes on anybody who wants to do business in Canada. And for some, it's prohibitive. And so they simply don't do business in Quebec. So whether or not this promotes and protects the French language or just cripples the Quebec economy, you can determine this based on your own assessment of the outcome. One of the other things, judges. Under the proposed amendments, they want to eliminate the requirement of judges of the courts of Quebec to be bilingual. And this also, even the Bar Society is taking issue with, because apparently this might violate a section of the Canadian Constitution that itself cannot be derogated by the notwithstanding clause, and that is a requirement that judges be able to adjudicate, carry on the judicial system in both official languages of Quebec, of the country. So this is a bit of a problematic proposed amendment to be determined how it pans out. But the Bill 96 would eliminate the requirement of bilingual judges in the Quebec justice system. Another proposed amendment is that the French version of laws would take precedent over the English version. Under the Bill 96, it is now being proposed that access by French Canadians to English cégeps, which is sort of the higher education after high school below university. It's a 2-year program. That access to English cégep would be limited or capped so that French-speaking Quebecers could not if they so chose, go study CEGEP in English or have access to English CEGEPs. Now, Bill 96 is seeking a compromise. It's not prohibiting it altogether. It's just implementing caps so that there will be no more spaces available for French-speaking Quebecers who may want to go to an English CEGEP or English collège, as we call them. So they're going to limit that. And again, the question is going to be, does this protect and promote the French language, or does it just penalize French Quebecers? But at the end of the day, this is what we voted for in Quebec, after all. We did elect Francois Legault. As a matter of principle, I have nothing against a nation, a province, a culture trying to protect, promote their own culture through reasonable legislation. My only issue is I don't believe that you protect a culture and a language through legislation. I think that is a very counterproductive way of doing it. It actually just creates animosity, and it doesn't actually promote that which is necessary in order to promote and protect a culture. It is not done through legislation. It is done through the desire, the internal desire to not just protect and promote, but to outwardly express that culture and to export that culture elsewhere. So it's all fine and well. They tried it with Bill 101. If they think it didn't work, I don't think a stricter Bill 96 is going to do it. In principle, I have no problem with it in that Quebec is a French province, and I do think that within the realm of that which is constitutional and justifiable, I have no problem implementing certain laws and regulations that seek to promote and protect the French language. The only question is, as a matter of practical principle, if it hasn't worked after 40 years, is it going to work now? Now, where the Anglo community is coming in now is saying, look at this government not respecting our linguistic rights, invoking the notwithstanding clause to violate our linguistic rights. We are Canadian citizens. We have a charter. We have linguistic rights. And this is the context in which my friend came to me and said, shed some light on this, expose the constitutional abuse from the government. To which I said, too late. You reap what you sow. You're coming to me now to complain about the fact that the government is violating your linguistic rights when, by and large, the Anglo community of Quebec for the last year and a half to 2 years of this pandemic have sat on their hands and ushered this in. You have said to the Francois Legault government, we don't care about mobility rights. We don't care about our rights to liberty and enjoyment of property. We don't care about any of our rights. Lock us in our homes after 8 o'clock. Impose mask mandates. Impose vaccine passports. Impose laws and regulations that quite literally violate our most fundamental rights and liberties as guaranteed by the Charter. We sat idly by and welcomed those in, some of us at least. But you have spent the last 2 years empowering the Francois Legault government to violate your most fundamental and sacred rights and liberties, and now you think he's gone too far because he went over your language rights? You reap what you sow. This is the government you have created. This is the precedent you have created, and I agree. Invoking the notwithstanding clause, it has gone from the exceptional clause of the Constitution to the default clause when the government wants to violate your rights. But too bad, you empowered this government to do it. You are now going to live with the government you created. You are now going to sleep in the bed that you made because the government would not feel empowered to systematically violate your linguistic rights if you had not authorized them to systematically violate each and every one of your other constitutional rights. So this may not be the message you want to hear out there, Anglo Quebecers, CJAD. Now you get up and angry because they're violating your linguistic rights when for the last year and a half, you have been the ones promoting laws and regulations that violate our most sacred rights. In particular, our rights to bodily integrity. If we want to go to a coffee shop, if we want to go to a cinema, if we want to visit someone in the hospital, we need to be compelled to take a vaccine. And that was fine with you, but they don't want you putting English on a sign. Now you're up in arms. I'm sorry, you have placed the value not where it ought to have been placed from the beginning, because once you tolerate a violation of your rights anywhere, you have sanctioned a violation of your rights everywhere, and it's too late to complain now. So I will continue complaining about a government that does not respect constitutional rights and freedoms. This, however, is not the line I would have drawn in the sand. That line has been drawn a long time ago, but at the very least, maybe now this will awaken Quebecers to what is going on with our government, not just in the province, but in Canada itself, because this is not purely a provincial issue. The government thinking it has the power to violate our most basic constitutional rights. This is being done in Nova Scotia, where they prohibited peaceful assembly and protest. This has been done in Alberta now, where Jason Kenney is saying that the unvaccinated cannot meet for indoor gatherings. Once you tolerate tolerated anywhere, you have tolerated it everywhere, and this is just another manifestation of a government that does not respect your constitutional rights. There, I said it. Viva Frei, by the way, a Montreal litigator turned YouTuber, and Winnie the Westie, who has fallen asleep listening to me rant. My goodness. Okay, we might have to cut his hair, not because it covers his eyes, because he's blind, so he doesn't really need to see all that well, but because stuff is getting stuck in his fur. With that said, if you like my videos, you like my content, please be sure to like, share, subscribe, hit the notification bell, drop a comment in the comment section below, all that fun stuff. And if you respect your constitutional rights at large, you do not wait until the one that you actually really care about gets violated before getting up in arms. You protest from the very beginning, because once the government gets in the habit of violating one constitutional right, it will get in the habit of violating every constitutional right. With that said, peace out. Booyah.